had this conversation before the show. Who is the most influential white athlete of all time? In the chat, I need your answer.
I want to see what they say.
Any sport. I need your answer. Any sport. Not football, not exclusively football, not exclusively basketball. Who is the most influential white athlete?
While we're waiting for
Caitlin Clark.
Oh, she like 3. So she like, she top 3.
Wow.
She might be 2. No, she's 1.
Oh.
She's 1.
Damn, that question.
One.
Caitlin Clark, the most influential white athlete in all of history. Shady McCoy.
Only got to be white.
Someone just called Caitlin Clark the most influential white athlete of all time in a room full of people who absolutely were not her fans. At first, the claim sounded crazy. The room immediately fired back with bigger names, legends like Larry Bird and global icons like David Beckham. The debate got loud. Everyone had an argument. Everyone had receipts. But something strange happened as the conversation went on. One by one, the counter-arguments started falling apart. The numbers, the cultural impact, the attention she's bringing to the game, every road somehow led back to the same name. By the end of the debate, the room that once pushed back the hardest had nothing left to say. Because somehow, against all expectations, the conversation started in 10 different directions, but it only ended in one place: Caitlin Clark.
Serena was great for us. She was great.
The greatest.
Who was watching women's basketball? Think about what we're talking about, though.
Nobody.
Yo, you wasn't. You wasn't. He wasn't. Nobody's watching women's basketball. And then we get this girl like Steph Curry. Everybody watching. To this day. To this day. Women's basketball is looked at like the NBA, like the NFL.
Who do you think is the most influential white athlete of all time? And does Caitlin Clark belong in that conversation, or maybe even above it? Drop your answer in the comments right now. At first, the question sounds simple. But the moment you really think about it, it becomes a lot more interesting than it appears on the surface. Most influential white athlete of all time. Any sport. Any era. The debate quickly started filling up with legendary names. People brought up Larry Bird, the NBA icon who helped transform basketball in the 1980s. Then came Michael Phelps, the most decorated Olympian ever. Someone else argued for David Beckham because of his global fame and cultural reach. Others threw in Conor McGregor for how he exploded the popularity of MMA and Tony Hawk for making skateboarding mainstream. But eventually, the conversation kept circling back to one name: Caitlin Clark. Not because anyone was trying to make a point about race, but because when people started applying the real criteria, influence, cultural reach, changing audience behavior, and actually moving the needle, one name kept winning round after round of the argument.
You see, there's blocks where they're going to talk about Luka and they're going to talk about Caitlin Clark.
True.
Hey,
think about it. I like
Shady's
this point. Last point. The girl that should have played like I don't know, LSU or USC.
Yep.
She played at Iowa.
Yeah.
Y'all tripping. Caitlin Clark.
The problem is this, though, 2-5. Serena Williams.
Let's go through the candidates first, because the elimination process is actually the most entertaining part. Michael Phelps came up early, and the pushback was immediate and, honestly, completely valid. Phelps is the most decorated Olympian in history. 23 gold medals. A swimmer so dominant that his very existence seemed to redefine what the human body was capable of in the water. But here's the real question people started asking. Did he make you want to swim? Did kids all across the country suddenly start begging their parents for pool memberships because of him? The honest answer was not really. And the reason comes down to infrastructure. Swimming requires a pool. Not everyone has access to one. Not everyone lives near a public pool. The barrier to entry is high enough that even the greatest swimmer who ever lived couldn't fully convert his dominance into a massive wave of participation. Phelps was undeniably huge. His achievements were historic. But when the conversation shifted from greatness to influence, people started realizing that his impact had real limits.
In Ireland, some of the most influential white athlete, though, point blank period, is David Beckham. They were bend it like Beckham. You know that, and you never watched a game of soccer in your entire life. Like that, like he's got stupid.
You don't think David Beckham,
bro? David Beckham was like.
I don't think so. I'm not saying he's a great guy. He's a great dude, looks nice. He got magazines. I'm cool with all that.
Who wants to play like Larry Bird, though?
Not Larry Bird, but I like.
David Beckham got a serious argument, and the person making it had a point. You could go your entire life without watching a single soccer match and still know exactly who Beckham was. Bend It Like Beckham became a cultural reference. The hairstyles, the fashion, the relationship with Victoria Beckham, and the constant crossover into pop culture made him just as visible on magazine covers as he was on the pitch. That kind of visibility is real influence. Beckham became one of the most globally recognizable athletes of his era, reaching demographics that had never even watched a full 90-minute match. But the counterargument was just as strong. In the United States, where influence often gets measured because of the massive size of the market, Beckham's impact was more about celebrity than sport. When he moved to LA Galaxy in Major League Soccer, the expectation was that he might ignite a true soccer explosion in America. That explosion never really came during his tenure. He was undeniably a cultural figure, but his influence on the growth of soccer in the American market was more limited than his global fame suggested. Then the conversation shifted to Larry Bird, and the argument there was always about basketball credibility. Bird is one of the greatest players in National Basketball Association history, 3 championships, 3 MVP awards, and 12 All-Star appearances. His rivalry with Magic Johnson is widely credited with helping save the NBA in the 1980s. His impact on the professional game is undeniable. But someone in the room made a point that shifted the tone of the debate. Nobody was running around saying they wanted to be Larry Bird. He was respected. He was feared by opponents. He was admired for his brilliance. But he never quite became the cultural aspiration that Michael Jordan became for an entire generation of kids picking up a basketball. Bird influenced the sport, but he didn't necessarily change who was entering the sport. Then Conor McGregor came up, and suddenly the room got louder, because this was the first name that started to blur the line between athlete and movement. Conor McGregor brought a completely different energy to the conversation. His swagger crossed racial and cultural lines in a way that very few white athletes ever have. The trash talk, the confidence, the larger-than-life personality that made people watch, even if they had never seen a single MMA fight in their lives. People with zero interest in mixed martial arts were still tuning in to McGregor press conferences because he was simply one of the most entertaining people to ever hold a microphone. There was something magnetic about it. The Irish working-class background delivered with the presence of someone who had fully convinced himself he was royalty. It connected with people across demographics in a way that felt genuinely unusual. For a stretch of time, he didn't just promote fights, he became the show. But the problem with McGregor as the final answer came down to scope and longevity. His influence was real, but it was concentrated within a specific window of time and inside a specific cultural lane. He undeniably helped make Ultimate Fighting Championship and MMA bigger, but he didn't fundamentally reshape the entire sporting ecosystem around him. Then someone in the chat threw out a name that immediately made the room pause: Tony Hawk. At first, it sounded almost surprising. But the more people thought about it, the more the room started to realize something important. Tony Hawk might be the most underrated answer in the entire debate. You know who Tony Hawk is even if you've never watched him land a single trick. That's influence. But then the conversation took a turn when Caitlin Clark entered the debate. The person who brought her up didn't come armed with charts or spreadsheets. No prepared statistics. Just one simple question. Who is watching women's basketball right now compared to 5 years ago? The room got quiet. Because the honest answer was obvious. Everyone. Or at least, far more people than ever before. Then came the follow-up question. Why? One name. One player. A guard from Iowa Hawkeyes women's basketball who pulls up from deep like Stephen Curry and handles the ball like she invented the step-back three. When she arrived in the Women's National Basketball Association with the Indiana Fever, something unusual happened almost immediately. Arenas started selling out not just for the Fever's home games, but for road games too. Visiting teams were suddenly packing their buildings because Caitlin Clark was coming to town. The league had to deal with a problem it had never really faced before: massive crowds. Venues that had rarely worried about overflow attendance suddenly had to think about security, seating expansions, and crowd management. And the television numbers told the exact same story, just in a different language. Ratings surged. Games that once struggled for national attention were suddenly drawing audiences that looked more like major sporting events. In other words, the debate stopped being theoretical. The impact was happening in real time. She did all of this while still being in the very early stage of a professional career, one that hasn't even produced a championship, a scoring title, or the kind of hardware that usually defines a legacy. Tony Hawk is a fantastic answer in the most influential white athlete conversation. Conor McGregor made a powerful case. David Beckham had undeniable global reach. Larry Bird helped transform the National Basketball Association during one of its most important eras. But when the debate shifted to a deeper question, who actually changed the surrounding ecosystem the most, the room started seeing things differently. Who made a league more profitable? Who pushed a sport into the mainstream? Who created an entirely new demographic of sports fans where they barely existed before? And who kept driving attention even when they weren't on the court? When the conversation reached that point, it landed somewhere very specific. Not Bird. Not Beckham. Not Hawk. The debate started with Larry Bird and ended with Caitlin Clark. And by the time the room got there, nobody really had a counterargument left. Now, whether you believe she's already earned that title or still needs time to prove it at the professional level, one thing is undeniable. The conversation is happening. And it's happening whether the Women's National Basketball Association is ready for it or not. If you enjoyed this breakdown, hit like, drop your take in the comments, and subscribe so you never miss the next debate.